The distant wail of an infant pierced the stillness of the Montana dusk as Owen Galloway rode wearily toward the lone cabin nestled against the shadow of the mountains. Blood soaked his shirt sleeve where a bullet had grazed him, and his eyes burned from 3 days without proper sleep. The crying grew louder as he approached, not one child but 2 distinct voices mingling together in desperate harmony. It was April 1876, and the Western Territories remained as unforgiving as they were beautiful. Owen had been tracking a gang of rustlers for nearly a week when he stumbled upon this isolated homestead. He'd intended only to ask for water and perhaps a place to rest his horse, but the sound of those desperate cries changed everything. He dismounted carefully, wincing at the pain in his side where he'd taken a fall the day before. His horse, a sturdy buckskin named Chance, snorted and pawed at the dirt. The cabin door hung partially open, and the crying echoed from within. Owen approached cautiously, his hand hovering near his holster. "Hello," he called. "Anybody home?" The crying continued unabated, but no adult voice answered. Owen pushed the door open wider, revealing a modest but neat interior. A woman lay still on a bed in the corner, her face pale and waxy in death. Near her, in a handcrafted wooden cradle, 2 infants no more than a few months old wailed with the full force of their tiny lungs. Owen removed his hat, a gesture of respect for the dead. As he did, he heard the soft click of a rifle hammer being drawn back. "Step away from my sister." The voice was steady but strained. Owen turned slowly to find a woman standing in the doorway to what appeared to be a small pantry, a Winchester rifle aimed squarely at his chest. She was tall and slender, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her dress was simple but clean, though her face showed clear signs of exhaustion and grief. Her eyes, a striking shade of green, were red-rimmed from crying but focused with determination. "Madam," Owen said, raising his hands, "I mean no harm. I heard the babies crying as I was passing by." "What happened to your arm?" she demanded, not lowering the rifle. "Run in with some cattle thieves. I'm tracking them for the ranchers over in Sterling Valley." The woman studied him for a long moment, then finally lowered the weapon slightly. "My sister died 2 days ago. Childbed fever. Her husband went for the doctor, but he never came back." Owen finished for her, understanding dawning. She nodded. "There was an accident at the river crossing. They found his body yesterday." Her voice caught, but she steadied herself. "I've been trying to care for the twins, but they won't stop crying. I've tried everything." Owen glanced at the infants. "What are their names?" "Mary and Michael. Twins. Born just 10 days ago." She finally lowered the rifle completely. "I'm Mabel Whitaker." "Owen Galloway," he replied, then gestured to the babies. "They won't stop crying," he said, his voice heavy with a helplessness that surprised even him. Mabel's eyes softened at his tone. She set the rifle aside and crossed to him. "Then let me hold them while you rest," she said simply, as though it were the most natural thing in the world to offer comfort to a stranger when she herself was drowning in sorrow. She lifted one of the infants, and then the other, cradling them against her chest. Their cries began to soften almost immediately. Owen watched her, struck by the quiet strength in her movements. "You've done this before." "I was married once," she said quietly, rocking gently. "We had a son. He would have been 5 this summer." Owen didn't need to ask what happened. The past tense told him everything. Loss was as common as dirt out here. "You need that arm tended to," she said, nodding toward his bloody sleeve. "There's clean water in the bucket and bandages in that trunk by the window." Owen hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker." "Miss," she corrected. "It's been 3 years since the fever took my husband and son." As Owen cleaned his wound, Mabel continued to rock the babies. One had fallen silent, but the other still fussed. "The little girl is hungry," Mabel explained. "I've been trying to feed them with a cloth dipped in goat's milk, but it's not working well." "No wet nurse nearby?" "The nearest neighbor is 15 miles. I sent word with the man who brought news of my brother-in-law's death, but I don't know if anyone will come." Owen finished bandaging his arm and looked at her thoughtfully. "I'm not much good with babies, but I can ride for help." Mabel shook her head. "In your condition? You'd likely fall from your horse before you made it 5 miles." She glanced out the window at the darkening sky. "Besides, night's coming. You should rest here and continue on in the morning." "What about you?" When did you last sleep? Mabel gave a tired smile. I don't rightly remember. Owen made a decision then. The rustlers could wait another day. Here's what we'll do. You show me how to help with these little ones, and we'll take turns through the night. Tomorrow, I'll ride to town and bring back proper help. Mabel studied him, clearly weighing his trustworthiness. Why would you do that? You don't know us. Owen looked at the babies, then at the dead woman on the bed, and finally back to Mabel. Because out here, we help each other. It's the only way any of us survive. After a moment, Mabel nodded. There's stew in the pot over the fire. You should eat. That night, Owen learned the basics of caring for infants. Mabel showed him how to change wrappings and how to hold a baby properly, supporting the fragile neck. She demonstrated how to feed them using a cloth soaked in milk and how to burp them afterward. It was all foreign to him, but he was a quick learner. They took turns sleeping in short stretches. When it was Owen's turn to watch over the babies, he found himself talking to them quietly, telling them stories of his adventures across the Western Territories. You'll be riding horses before you know it, he whispered to the boy as he rocked him. And you, he said to the little girl, who had finally fallen asleep. You'll be the prettiest girl in Montana Territory. He didn't realize Mabel was awake and listening until she spoke from the small cot in the corner. You're good with them. Owen looked up, slightly embarrassed. Just talking nonsense. They like the sound of your voice. It's soothing. She sat up and pushed her hair from her face. Most men wouldn't have stopped. Most men haven't seen what I've seen. Owen didn't elaborate, and Mabel didn't press. Dawn came with a gentle pink glow on the horizon. Mabel had managed a few hours of sleep, and Owen had succeeded in keeping the babies relatively content. They cried less when held, and he'd spent most of the night with one or both in his arms. As Mabel prepared a simple breakfast, Owen stepped outside to check on his horse and survey the homestead in daylight. It was a modest but well-built place, with a small barn, a chicken coop, and the beginnings of a vegetable garden. Good land, with a creek running nearby. The kind of place a man might settle if he were inclined toward putting down roots. When he returned to the cabin, Mabel was changing the infants. There's coffee, she said, nodding toward the pot on the stove. Owen poured himself a cup and sat at the small table. Your sister's husband built a fine place here. Thomas was a good man. Hard-working. He and Sarah had been trying for children for years. Her voice caught. They were so happy when they found out about the twins. Owen sipped his coffee, unsure what to say. Words of comfort seemed hollow in the face of such tragedy. I need to bury her, Mabel said suddenly. Before you leave for town. I can't leave her like this another day. Owen nodded. I'll dig the grave. He spent the next hour digging in the soft earth behind the cabin, where a small picket fence enclosed what appeared to be a family plot. There were already 3 simple wooden crosses there, bearing the names of Sarah and Thomas's parents, who had started the homestead years earlier. When the grave was ready, Owen helped Mabel wrap her sister's body in a clean bedsheet. Together, they carried her outside and laid her gently in the earth. Mabel had placed the sleeping infants in their cradle just inside the door, where she could see them. Neither of them had a Bible, but Mabel recited from memory the 23rd Psalm. Her voice was clear and strong, despite the tears that slid silently down her cheeks. When she finished, Owen took off his hat and added his own simple prayer. Lord, take this good woman into your keeping. Watch over her children and give strength to those left behind. As he began to shovel earth over the body, Mabel returned to the cabin to check on the babies. By the time he had finished and placed a temporary marker, she had fed and changed them again. I should head to town now, Owen said, washing the dirt from his hands. What supplies do you need most? Mabel handed him a list she had prepared. The general store should have most of this. Mrs. Peterson, the shopkeeper's wife, might know of someone who could help with the babies, or at least provide better advice than I can. Owen studied the list: milk, flour, sugar, coffee, baby bottles if available, clean linens, and several other necessities. I'll get everything I can. Should be back by nightfall. As he saddled Chance, Mabel approached with a small bundle. Food for your journey. It's not much, just biscuits and jerky. Thank you. Their fingers brushed as he took the package, and something passed between them, a moment of connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. Be careful, she said, stepping back. Those rustlers might still be around. I'll keep my eyes open. Owen mounted his horse and tipped his hat. Take care of those little ones. I'll be back as soon as I can. The ride to town took nearly 4 hours. Sterling was a small but growing settlement, with a main street that boasted a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and the sheriff's office. Owen tied his horse outside the law office and went in to report what he knew about the rustlers. Sheriff Tate was a grizzled man in his 50s, with a reputation for fairness and a no-nonsense attitude. "Galloway," he said, recognizing Owen from previous visits. "Thought you'd be halfway to Helena by now, chasing those thieves. Got sidetracked." Owen explained, then told him about finding Mabel and the twins. The sheriff shook his head sadly. "Heard about Thomas Miller's accident. Damn shame. He was a good man." He scratched his beard. "So the sister-in-law's out there alone with 2 newborns?" "Yes, sir. She's managing, but barely. I told her I'd bring back supplies and find help if I could. The widow Jenkins might be willing to go out there. Her youngest just turned 8, but she was known for taking in orphans for a time. Has a way with babies." Sheriff Tate stood. "I'll talk to her while you get those supplies. Meet back here in an hour." Owen nodded and headed for the general store. Mrs. Peterson, a kindly woman with graying hair, clucked sympathetically when he explained the situation. Poor Sarah. She was so happy about those babies. She began gathering the items on Mabel's list. "We don't have proper baby bottles, but I have some glass vials with rubber nipples that might work. Came in on the last shipment from Denver." While Mrs. Peterson assembled the supplies, Owen noticed a man at the counter watching him intently. He was tall and lean, with a handlebar mustache and expensive clothes that marked him as someone of means. "You're the one tracking the Hardin Gang?" the man asked, stepping closer. Owen nodded cautiously. "That's right. Maxwell Blackwood." The man introduced himself, extending a hand. "I own the Double B Ranch north of here. Those bastards took 30 head from me last week." Owen shook his hand. "Owen Galloway. I was on their trail until I came across the Miller place." Blackwood's expression darkened. "Yes, Thomas Miller. Worked for me for a time before he took up homesteading. Shame what happened." He lowered his voice. "Word is, it wasn't an accident." Owen's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "Miller caught one of the Hardin boys trying to steal his mule the day before. There was an altercation. Some think his accident at the river was arranged. The information changed things. If the Hardin Gang had killed Miller, they might return to the homestead, especially if they thought there was something there worth taking." "Much obliged for the information," Owen said, his mind already racing ahead to what this might mean for Mabel and the babies. "If you need help," Blackwood offered, "my men are at your disposal. I want those thieves brought to justice." Owen thanked him but made no commitments. Blackwood seemed sincere, but Owen had learned long ago to be cautious about entanglements with wealthy ranchers. They often had their own agendas. With the supplies loaded into saddlebags and a small wagon the sheriff had arranged, Owen met with Mrs. Jenkins, a sturdy woman in her 40s with kind eyes and capable hands. "I can stay with her for a week or so," Mrs. Jenkins said after hearing the situation. "Help get those babies on a proper feeding schedule and teach her what she needs to know. After that, she'll need to decide what to do long-term. A woman alone can't run that homestead and care for 2 infants." Owen knew she was right, but something in him rebelled at the thought of Mabel having to give up her sister's home or, worse, the children. They set out for the Miller homestead late in the afternoon. Mrs. Jenkins drove the small wagon containing additional supplies and a trunk of her personal belongings, while Owen rode alongside. The sun was beginning to set when they crested the final hill overlooking the cabin. What they saw made Owen's blood run cold. 3 horses were tied outside, and even from a distance, he could see the door to the cabin standing wide open. "Stay here," he ordered Mrs. Jenkins, drawing his revolver. "If there's trouble, turn around and head back to town as fast as you can." He urged Chance forward, keeping low in the saddle and approaching from an angle that would give him some cover from the trees near the property. As he drew closer, he could hear men's voices and then, alarmingly, Mabel's raised in anger. "Get out of my home. You have no right to be here. Your home." A harsh laugh. "This ain't your property, lady. Your brother-in-law owed us, and we aim to collect." Owen dismounted and tied Chance to a tree, then crept toward the cabin. Through the open door, he could see 3 men, rough-looking characters with the unmistakable bearing of outlaws. Mabel stood defiantly in the center of the room, her rifle in hand but pointed at the floor. The babies were in their cradle behind her, and she had positioned herself as a human shield. Thomas Miller never owed you a thing, Mabel was saying. You're nothing but thieves and liars. Watch your mouth, woman. The largest of the men growled, stepping toward her. That rifle looks mighty heavy for such delicate hands. Why don't you set it down before someone gets hurt? Owen had seen enough. He moved to the side of the cabin and looked through the window. The men were focused on Mabel, their backs partially to the door. One of them had moved toward the cradle, peering at the infants with an expression that made Owen's jaw clench. Cute little things, the man said with a smirk. Shame they ain't got no daddy no more. Accidents happen so easy out here. The implication was clear, and Mabel's face went white. You murdered him. Now, I wouldn't say. Owen kicked the door fully open, his revolver leveled at the man nearest Mabel. Step away from her. Now. The outlaws whirled around, reaching for their weapons, but Owen had the drop on them. Don't try it, he warned. Next man who touches his gun dies first. Galloway, the leader of the group, said, recognition dawning. Heard you were sniffing around after us. Hardin, Owen acknowledged. Didn't know you'd taken to threatening women and babies. That's a new low, even for you. Mabel had raised her rifle, now aiming it squarely at the outlaw nearest the cradle. Her hands were steady, her eyes fierce. We were just having a conversation, Hardin said with a forced casualness, explaining to the lady here how her brother-in-law had debts that need settling. The only thing Thomas Miller owed you was a bullet, Mabel spat. Get out of my house. Owen kept his revolver trained on Hardin. You heard the lady. Leave now, and we'll let the sheriff deal with you. Make a move against us, and you won't leave at all. A tense silence filled the cabin. Outside, the sound of an approaching wagon could be heard. Hardin's eyes flickered toward the window. Seems like you've got reinforcements, he observed. Fine, we'll go. But this ain't over, Galloway. Not by a long shot. He signaled to his men, and they backed toward the door, hands carefully away from their weapons. One thing before you go, Owen said. You ever come near this homestead again, I'll kill you myself. There was no bravado in his voice, just a simple statement of fact. Hardin seemed to recognize the truth of it, for he merely nodded once before slipping out the door, his men following. Mabel kept her rifle raised until the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance. Only then did she lower the weapon, her shoulders sagging with relief and delayed fear. Are the babies all right? Owen asked, holstering his gun and moving toward the cradle. They're fine. They slept through most of it, thank God. Mabel set the rifle aside and ran a trembling hand over her face. They killed Thomas, didn't they? It seems likely, Owen admitted. Blackwood in town mentioned there'd been an altercation the day before Thomas died. Before Mabel could respond, Mrs. Jenkins appeared in the doorway. Is it safe to come in? She asked, her expression concerned but not fearful. Yes, madam, Owen assured her. The unwelcome visitors have departed. Introductions were made, and Mrs. Jenkins immediately took charge of checking on the infants. Her experienced hands and calm demeanor were exactly what was needed, and within minutes she had assessed their condition and declared them healthy but hungry. As Mrs. Jenkins set about preparing proper formula with the supplies they'd brought, Mabel pulled Owen aside. Thank you, she said simply. If you hadn't come when you did. Don't think about that, Owen advised. You were holding your own. I just evened the odds a bit. They'll be back, won't they? Owen couldn't lie to her. Possibly. Hardin isn't one to let go of a grudge easily. And if he thinks there's something here worth taking. There isn't, Mabel said firmly. This is just a simple homestead. The only things of value are the livestock and the land itself. Sometimes that's enough. Owen glanced out the window at the approaching dusk. I need to make sure they're truly gone and not just waiting for darkness. Will you be all right with Mrs. Jenkins? We'll be fine, Mrs. Jenkins called from where she was showing Mabel how to prepare the baby bottles. You go on and make sure those scoundrels are well away. Owen saddled Chance and rode the perimeter of the property, checking for signs that the Hardin Gang might be lingering nearby. He found their tracks heading west, away from the homestead and town, which concerned him. If they were avoiding Sterling, they might be planning something else. By the time he returned to the cabin, night had fallen. The warm glow of lamplight spilled from the windows, and when he entered, he found a transformed scene. The babies were fed, and sleeping peacefully. The cabin had been tidied, Sarah's bed stripped and remade with fresh linens, and the smell of cooking food filled the air. "Sit and eat," Mrs. Jenkins instructed, placing a plate of stew and biscuits on the table. "You look dead on your feet." Owen didn't argue. He washed up and took a seat, realizing suddenly how hungry he was. Mabel joined him at the table, while Mrs. Jenkins bustled about, making herself at home. "She's a godsend," Mabel whispered, nodding toward the older woman. "Already taught me more in an hour than I'd figured out in 2 days." "She'll stay for a week," Owen told her. "After that, have you thought about what you'll do?" Mabel's expression grew serious. "I'm not leaving," she said firmly. "This is Sarah and Thomas's land. It belongs to their children now. I won't abandon it or them. It's a hard life for a woman alone, especially with 2 infants. I'm no stranger to hard work, Mr. Galloway, and I've been alone before." Owen studied her face, seeing the determination there. "What about the Hardin Gang? They're dangerous men. All the more reason I can't leave. I won't let them drive me away from my family's home." She hesitated. "But I would be grateful if you could teach me to shoot better. I know the basics, but—" "I'd be happy to," Owen agreed. "Though I hope you never need to use those skills." As they ate, Mrs. Jenkins joined them, sharing advice and stories from her own experiences raising children. The conversation flowed easily, and Owen found himself relaxing for the first time in days. The cabin felt warm and almost homey, a stark contrast to the lonely campfires and saloon rooms that had been his only companions for years. Later, as Mrs. Jenkins retired to the small room that had been Thomas's workshop, temporarily converted to a bedroom, Mabel and Owen sat by the fire. The babies were sleeping nearby in their cradle, making occasional small sounds in their dreams. "Tell me about yourself," Mabel said quietly. "You know my story, but I know almost nothing about you." Owen stared into the flames, considering what to share. "Not much to tell. I was born in Missouri, came west after the war. Worked as a ranch hand, scout, sometimes a bounty hunter when times were lean. No family. Had a brother. Lost him at Shiloh. Parents passed years ago." He shifted in his chair. "Never settled anywhere long enough to start my own family." "Why not?" Mabel asked, her eyes reflecting the firelight. Owen shrugged. "Never found the right place, I suppose. Or the right person." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the crackling of the fire the only sound. "Why did you stop?" Mabel asked finally. "When you heard the babies crying, why did you come to investigate? Most men would have ridden on." Owen considered the question. "I'm not rightly sure," he admitted. "Something about those cries. I couldn't ignore them. Reminded me that for all the vastness of this country, we're still connected to each other somehow." Mabel smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her tired face. "That's a lovely thought, Mr. Galloway." "Owen," he corrected. "If we're going to be keeping company for a while, you might as well use my given name." "Owen," she repeated softly. "And I'm Mabel, not Miss Whitaker." They talked deep into the night, sharing stories and finding unexpected common ground. Mabel had grown up in Illinois, the daughter of a schoolteacher. She'd met her husband, James, when he came east to buy breeding stock for his small ranch in Montana. They'd been married just 2 years when the fever took him and their infant son. "After they died, I didn't know what to do with myself," she confessed. "So when Sarah wrote that she was expecting and needed help, I came west. I've been living with them for the past 6 months. And before that, what did you do for the year between?" "I taught school," she said, a hint of pride in her voice. "I have my mother's love of books and learning. The children were a joy, but every day I saw families together, and it hurt too much. Coming here was a fresh start." Owen understood the need for new beginnings all too well. "And now I have 2 little ones who need me." Her determination was clear. "I won't fail them." The next morning, Owen rose early to begin repairs on the barn door, which had been damaged when the Hardin Gang forced their way in. As he worked, he kept one eye on the horizon, wary of their return. Mrs. Jenkins had taken charge inside, showing Mabel how to properly bathe the infants and establish a feeding routine. By midday, Owen had repaired the door and moved on to checking the fences. The homestead was well built but needed regular maintenance, especially with spring storms approaching. He was examining a weak section of fencing when he heard a rider approaching. His hand went automatically to his holster, but he relaxed when he recognized Sheriff Tate. The lawman rode up and dismounted, shaking Owen's hand. "Galloway, heard there was some trouble out here yesterday." Hardin and two of his men, Owen confirmed. They were threatening Miss Whitaker, claiming Miller owed them money. "And you persuaded them to leave?" There was a hint of amusement in the sheriff's tone. "You might say that." Sheriff Tate nodded. "I figured as much. That's partly why I rode out to warn you they were spotted near the Carson Creek crossing this morning. Seems they've joined up with a couple more of their gang." Owen frowned. "Heading this way?" "Can't say for certain, but I thought you should know." The sheriff glanced toward the cabin. "How are things here otherwise?" "Mrs. Jenkins has been a blessing. The babies are doing better. Miss Whitaker is determined to stay and raise them here. Alone? That's a tall order." "She's stronger than she looks," Owen said, surprised by the defensiveness in his own voice. Sheriff Tate gave him a knowing look. "I see. Well, I've known Mabel Whitaker for almost a year now. Smart woman and brave. But even the strongest folk need help sometimes." He paused. "Blackwood mentioned you might be interested in taking a permanent position with his outfit. Said he could use a man with your skills." Owen had heard the offer from Blackwood himself before leaving town. It was tempting good pay, a stable position with a respectable ranch. The kind of job that might let a man put down roots. "I'm still considering it," Owen said noncommittally. "Well, don't consider too long. Opportunities like that don't come along every day." The sheriff remounted his horse. "I'll keep an eye out for Hardin and his boys. You do the same. And Owen," he added, his expression serious, "be careful. I'd hate to see anything happen to those children. Or Miss Whitaker." After the sheriff left, Owen returned to the cabin to share the news. Mabel was sitting in a rocking chair by the window, feeding one of the twins with the new bottle while Mrs. Jenkins prepared a meal. "Sheriff Tate said the Hardin Gang was spotted this morning," Owen told them. "They've picked up a couple more men." Mrs. Jenkins made a disapproving noise. "Vultures, the lot of them, preying on decent folk." Mabel looked up, concern in her eyes. "Do you think they'll come back?" "It's possible," Owen admitted. "We should be prepared, just in case." They spent the afternoon securing the cabin as best they could. Owen showed Mabel how to barricade the door quickly and which windows provided the best view of approaching riders. He took her outside for shooting practice, setting up tin cans on fence posts. Mabel proved to be a decent shot, though her hands trembled slightly with the weight of the rifle. "My husband taught me the basics," she explained. "But I've never had to use a gun against a person." "Let's hope you never have to," Owen said. "But if it comes to it, remember, aim for the center of the body. Don't try to be fancy." As dusk approached, Owen made a final check of the property before joining the women inside for supper. The meal was simple but satisfying rabbit stew with dumplings and fresh bread that Mrs. Jenkins had baked. "You're looking more rested," Mrs. Jenkins observed, studying Mabel's face. "And you've got the knack of feeding them now. Those babies will be plump as partridges before you know it." Mabel smiled, a hint of color in her cheeks. "Thanks to your teaching. I don't know what we would have done without you." "Oh, you'd have managed," Mrs. Jenkins said confidently. "Mothers have been raising babies since the beginning of time, often with less help than you've got." She cast a meaningful glance at Owen. "Though a strong pair of hands around the place never hurts." Owen felt his own face warm at the implication. He'd found himself increasingly drawn to Mabel over the past 2 days. Her quiet strength, her devotion to the children, and yes, the way the sunlight caught in her auburn hair, all of it stirred feelings he'd thought long buried. After supper, as they sat by the fire, little Michael began to fuss. Owen, who had been whittling a small wooden toy, set aside his knife and reached for the baby without thinking. "I can take him," he offered. "You've been holding them all day." Mabel handed the infant over with a grateful smile. Owen cradled the tiny boy against his chest, humming a soft tune his mother used to sing. Michael's cries subsided, and he gazed up at Owen with solemn dark eyes. "He likes you," Mabel observed. "We've come to an understanding, haven't we, little man?" Owen said to the baby. "You don't cry too loud, and I'll tell you stories about buffalo hunts and cattle drives when you're older." Mrs. Jenkins chuckled. "You've got away with children, Mr. Galloway. You'd make a fine father." Owen didn't respond, but the comment settled somewhere deep in his chest, awakening possibilities he'd never seriously considered. That night, after Mrs. Jenkins had retired and the babies were asleep, Owen and Mabel sat on the small porch, watching the stars emerge. The spring air was crisp but not uncomfortable, and the night was peaceful. Sheriff Tate mentioned you'd been offered a job with Blackwood's ranch, Mabel said after a while. Owen glanced at her. News travels fast. It's a good position. The Double B is the biggest spread in the county. Yes, it is. He studied her profile in the moonlight. I haven't decided yet. Mabel nodded, her expression unreadable. You'll be leaving soon, then, whether for that job or to continue tracking the Hardin Gang. It wasn't a question, but Owen felt compelled to answer anyway. I suppose I should. But, he took a breath. I'm not sure I want to. The admission hung between them, its implications clear. Mabel turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his. Why? She asked simply. Because in 3 days, I've found more peace here than in 10 years of wandering. Owen's voice was low and earnest. Because those babies in there need someone to protect them in this land. Because you. He trailed off, unsure how to express what he was feeling without overstepping. Mabel reached out and touched his hand lightly. It's too soon, she said gently. For both of us. You don't know me, not really. And I'm still finding my footing with the twins. I know, Owen agreed. I'm not asking for anything. Just saying that leaving doesn't feel right. Not yet. Then stay, Mabel suggested. At least until we're sure the Hardin Gang is no longer a threat. The barn has a small room that Thomas used for new calves. It's clean and dry. Owen smiled. I've slept in far worse places. They sat in companionable silence for a while longer, the vast Montana sky stretching endlessly above them. What will you do when Mrs. Jenkins leaves? Owen asked eventually. Manage as best I can, Mabel replied. The babies are getting more regular in their feeding and sleeping. It will be hard, but not impossible. And the homestead? There's planting to be done, livestock to tend. One day at a time, she said with quiet determination. I'll hire help when I can. Thomas left some money, and I have a small savings from my teaching days. Owen hesitated, then said, I could stay on a bit longer. Help with the spring planting, repair what needs fixing. Just until you find someone permanent. Mabel studied him for a long moment. Why would you do that? You barely know us. Maybe I'd like to change that, Owen said softly. The next 5 days passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Owen stayed, sleeping in the small room in the barn and working from sunrise to sunset on the homestead. He repaired fences, reinforced the cabin walls, dug irrigation channels for the garden, and helped Mabel plant the first crops of the season. Mrs. Jenkins proved invaluable, not just with the babies, but in teaching Mabel everything from how to preserve food to how to recognize and treat common childhood ailments. The older woman watched with knowing eyes as Owen and Mabel worked side by side, their initial awkwardness giving way to an easy partnership. There was no sign of the Hardin Gang, though Owen remained vigilant. Sheriff Tate rode by twice with updates the outlaws had been spotted near the territorial border, suggesting they might have moved on to easier targets. On the evening before Mrs. Jenkins was due to return to town, a spring storm blew in from the mountains. Thunder rolled across the valley, and rain lashed against the cabin windows. The babies, startled by the noise, wailed in unison until Mabel and Mrs. Jenkins managed to soothe them. Owen came in from securing the animals, soaked to the skin and grinning at the ferocity of the storm. Barns battened down, he reported, removing his dripping hat and coat. Animals are safe and dry, which is more than I can say for myself. Mabel handed him a towel. Change into dry clothes before you catch your death. There's hot coffee on the stove. The domesticity of the moment struck Owen forcefully. The warm cabin, the smell of cooking food, Mabel's concerned expression, the babies now sleeping contentedly. It felt like home in a way no place had for years. Later, as the storm continued to rage outside, Mrs. Jenkins announced she was retiring early to pack for her departure the next day. Once she had gone, Owen and Mabel sat at the table, a chest set between them that Owen had found in Thomas's trunk. Your move, Mabel said, studying the board. Owen moved his knight, capturing one of her pawns. Where did you learn to play? My father taught me. He said it builds character and foresight. She moved her bishop decisively. Your knight is in danger now. Owen chuckled. So it is. He studied the board, then her face. You're a formidable opponent, Mabel Whitaker. In chess, perhaps, She watched as he contemplated his next move. In life, I've often felt outmatched. I don't believe that for a minute, Owen said. You faced more hardship than most and stayed standing. That takes remarkable strength. Mabel's eyes met his. I haven't always been strong. After James and the baby died, there were days I didn't want to continue. But you did. Yes. She looked toward the cradle where the twins slept. And now I have a reason to be stronger than ever. Owen moved his rook, deliberately leaving an opening for her queen. What happened to your husband and son, if you don't mind my asking? Scarlet fever, Mabel said quietly. It swept through our area like wildfire. James caught it first, then the baby. I nursed them both, but... She shook her head. The doctor said it was a miracle I didn't catch it myself. I'm sorry, Owen said simply. What about you? Mabel asked, moving her queen as he'd anticipated. You mentioned a brother lost in the war, but nothing about your own experiences. Owen was silent for a moment, his fingers tracing the edge of the chessboard. I served with the Missouri Volunteers. Saw action at Wilson's Creek and Pea Ridge. He moved his bishop, protecting his king. After my brother died at Shiloh, something in me changed. I couldn't see the purpose anymore in any of it. So you came west. So I came west, he agreed. Looking for something I couldn't name. Space, maybe. Room to breathe without the ghosts of the past following too closely. And did you find it? Owen looked up, meeting her gaze steadily. I'm beginning to think that what I've been looking for all these years wasn't a place at all. A log shifted in the fireplace, sending up a shower of sparks. Outside, the rain continued to fall, drumming on the roof in a soothing rhythm. It's getting late, Mabel said softly, though she made no move to rise. And I should check on the babies. Of course. Owen began to reset the chess pieces. We can finish another time. Mabel stood and went to the cradle, adjusting the blankets over the sleeping infants. When she turned back, she found Owen watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. Mabel, he began, then paused, searching for the right words. Yes, I meant what I said before. About staying on to help. Not just for a few weeks, but longer, if you'd want that. Mabel took a deep breath. Owen, a sudden pounding on the door interrupted her. Owen was on his feet instantly, his hand going to his holster. Who's there? He called, moving between Mabel and the door. Owen. It's Sheriff Tate. Let me in, it's urgent. Owen opened the door to find the sheriff dripping wet and breathing hard, as though he'd ridden fast and far. What's happened? Owen asked, ushering him inside. Hardin, the sheriff said grimly. He and his gang hit the Stevens place about 10 miles from here. Burned the barn, stole livestock. Mr. Stevens was shot, but he'll live. Mabel gasped. When? Earlier today. They were headed this way, according to Stevens' oldest boy who tracked them a piece before losing the trail in the storm. Mrs. Jenkins had emerged from her room, her face pale but resolute. The babies. We need to get them somewhere safe, Owen said decisively. If Hardin's bent on revenge, this will be his next target. Sheriff Tate nodded. That's why I rode out, storm be damned. Blackwoods offered his ranch as a safe haven. It's well staffed and defensible. In this weather? Mabel looked doubtfully at the twins. It's a 2-hour ride in good conditions. Better than staying here, the sheriff argued. Hardin had at least 6 men with him. We'd be outnumbered. Owen thought quickly. Sheriff, how many deputies could you round up tonight? 2, maybe 3. Most folks are staying close to home in this storm. Then we stand and fight, Owen said firmly. The cabin's solid. We have good sight lines. And I'd rather face them here than risk the babies on the trail in this weather. Mabel touched his arm. This isn't your fight, Owen. It became my fight the moment Hardin threatened you and the children. His expression softened as he looked at her. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. After a brief debate, they agreed on a plan. Sheriff Tate would ride back to town to gather reinforcements and return as quickly as possible. In the meantime, Owen, Mabel, and Mrs. Jenkins would prepare the cabin for a possible attack. As the sheriff disappeared into the stormy night, Owen began barricading windows and positioning furniture to create defensive positions. Mabel gathered ammunition and checked both rifles while Mrs. Jenkins prepared the twins for a possible quick departure, wrapping them warmly and packing essential supplies. If shooting starts, Owen instructed, get down behind the stone wall of the fireplace. It's the most solid part of the cabin. Mabel nodded, her face pale but determined. I'm not hiding if they come. I can shoot. I know you can, Owen assured her. But the babies need you more than I do. The storm began to abate around midnight, the thunder growing more distant and the rain softening to a gentle patter. The silence that followed was almost eerie after hours of howling wind and rain. Owen stood by the window, watching the clearing sky. A nearly full moon emerged from behind the clouds, illuminating the yard with silvery light. I don't like this, he murmured. Too easy to see approaching riders now. Mabel joined him, her rifle cradled in her arms. But we can see them too. True enough. He glanced at her. You should try to get some sleep. I'll keep watch. I couldn't sleep now if I tried, she admitted. Besides, for eyes are better than two. Mrs. Jenkins had dozed off in the rocking chair near the cradle, one hand resting protectively on the edge. The babies, remarkably, slept peacefully through the night's tensions. They're resilient, Mabel said, following Owen's gaze to the sleeping infants. Like their mother was. Like their aunt is, Owen corrected gently. Mabel smiled faintly. I hope I can be what they need. You already are. They stood in companionable silence, watching the moonlit landscape. Gradually, the eastern sky began to lighten, the first hint of dawn approaching. Maybe they won't come, Mabel said hopefully. Maybe the sheriff will get back with reinforcements first. As if in answer to her words, Owen stiffened. Riders, he said quietly, coming from the west. At least 5 of them. Mabel peered through the window. In the gray pre-dawn light, she could just make out mounted figures moving slowly along the ridge line. Wake Mrs. Jenkins, Owen instructed. Tell her to get ready with the babies, just in case. As Mabel roused the older woman, Owen checked his revolver and rifle one final time. The approaching riders were making no attempt at stealth, moving openly down the slope toward the cabin. They don't know the sheriff's gone for help, Owen realized. They're expecting just us. Good, Mabel said, returning to his side. Let them underestimate us. Owen gave her a quick, fierce smile. You are something else, Mabel Whitaker. The riders drew rein about 50 yards from the cabin. There were 6 of them, with Hardin easily recognizable in the lead. They spread out in a loose semicircle, keeping their horses between themselves and the cabin as partial cover. Galloway, Hardin called. We know you're in there. Come on out, and maybe we'll let the women go. Owen didn't respond, merely nodded to Mabel to stay low and out of sight. Last chance, Galloway, Hardin shouted. Miller owed us, and we aim to collect, one way or another. When there was still no response, Hardin signaled to his men. 2 of them dismounted and began to approach the cabin from different angles, using trees and outbuildings for cover. When they get within 30 yards, Owen whispered to Mabel, I'll take the one on the left. You aim for the ground near the one on the right just enough to send him scurrying back. Mabel nodded, her hand steady on her rifle. The outlaws advanced cautiously. When they reached the marker Owen had indicated, he gave a slight nod. Both he and Mabel fired simultaneously. Owen's shot causing one man to cry out and clutch his arm. Mabel's kicking up dirt near the second man's feet. Both outlaws retreated hastily to the safety of their horses. That was just a warning, Owen called out. The next ones won't be so friendly. Hardin cursed loudly. You're outnumbered, Galloway. Be reasonable. I'm being plenty reasonable, Owen replied. I'm giving you the chance to ride away alive. The standoff continued as the dawn light strengthened. Hardin and his men conferred briefly, then spread out further, clearly planning to approach from multiple directions. They're going to rush us, Owen said grimly. Mrs. Jenkins, take the babies into the root cellar. There's a trapdoor under that rug. The older woman nodded and gathered the twins, who had begun to fuss at the sound of gunfire. She disappeared through the hidden door in the floor, closing it behind her. Mabel, take position by the back window. I'll cover the front. Don't shoot unless you have a clear target. As Mabel moved to her assigned post, Owen took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He'd been in gunfights before, but never with so much at stake. The attack, when it came, was swift and coordinated. 3 men rushed the front of the cabin, while 2 circled to the back. Gunfire erupted, bullets thudding into the walls and shattering one window. Owen fired methodically, dropping one attacker with a shot to the leg. Mabel's rifle cracked from the back of the cabin, followed by a shout of pain. Got one, she called. Stay down, Owen warned as bullets splintered the doorframe near his head. The exchange of gunfire continued for several minutes. Owen was careful with his ammunition, making each shot count. He'd wounded at least 2 of Hardin's men, but they kept up their assault, clearly determined to take the cabin. A sudden crash from the back room made Owen's heart lurch. "Mabel, they're breaking through the back door," she cried. Owen moved swiftly to help her, but at that moment, the front door burst open. Hardin himself stood there, gun drawn. Owen spun and fired, his bullet grazing Hardin's side. The outlaw staggered but didn't fall, returning fire as he sought cover behind a heavy table. In the back room, Mabel was fighting her own battle. One of Hardin's men had partially broken through the door and was reaching through to unlock it. Without hesitation, Mabel brought the butt of her rifle down on his arm. There was a satisfying crack, followed by a howl of pain, and the arm withdrew. The cabin was filled with smoke and the deafening echo of gunfire. Owen and Hardin exchanged shots, neither able to gain a clear advantage. "Give it up, Galloway," Hardin shouted. "You can't win this." "Then why are 3 of your men bleeding?" Owen taunted, trying to draw Hardin's fire while he reloaded. The strategy worked. Hardin rose slightly to get a better shot, and Owen fired, catching the outlaw in the shoulder. Hardin fell back, cursing viciously. In the sudden lull, a new sound reached them: hoofbeats, many of them, approaching fast. "Boss," one of the outlaws shouted from outside. "Riders coming. Looks like the sheriff and a posse." Hardin's face contorted with rage and pain. "This ain't over," he snarled at Owen. Then, louder, to his men, "Fall back. Into the trees." Owen kept his gun trained on Hardin until the outlaw had backed out of the cabin. Through the window, he saw Hardin mount his horse awkwardly, still clutching his bleeding shoulder, and gallop away with his remaining men. "Mabel," Owen called, his voice hoarse from the smoke. "Are you all right?" "I'm here," she answered, emerging from the back room. Her face was smudged with gunpowder, and there was a small cut on her cheek from flying splinters, but she was otherwise unharmed. "Are they gone?" "For now. Sheriff's coming with reinforcements." Owen crossed to her quickly, his eyes scanning for injuries. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," she assured him, touching the cut. "What about you?" Owen suddenly realized he'd been hit. A bullet had grazed his upper arm, tearing his shirt and leaving a bloody furrow. "Just a scratch," he said, though now that he noticed it, the wound began to throb. Outside, horses thundered into the yard. Sheriff Tate's voice called out, "Galloway? Miss Whitaker? You folks all right in there?" "We're fine, Sheriff," Owen responded, moving to the door. Hardin and his men just retreated to the east. 3 or 4 of them are wounded. The sheriff dismounted, followed by 6 armed men, including Maxwell Blackwood himself. "We heard the shooting from a mile away," Tate said. "Came as fast as we could." "You're just in time," Owen said. "Mrs. Jenkins is in the root cellar with the babies." While several of the posse set off in pursuit of the Hardin Gang, Blackwood insisted on having his personal physician, who had accompanied the group, examine Owen and Mabel's injuries. "Just minor wounds," the doctor pronounced. "You were lucky." "Skill had something to do with it too," Blackwood observed, looking around at the bullet-scarred cabin with professional interest. "Not many could have held off 6 men. It wasn't just me," Owen said, glancing at Mabel, who was helping Mrs. Jenkins soothe the twins. "Miss Whitaker is quite the markswoman." Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "Is she now?" Full of surprises, these Eastern ladies. The cleanup began immediately. Windows were boarded up, bullet holes patched, and the broken door temporarily repaired. Sheriff Tate promised to send men to help with more permanent repairs the next day. "Hardin won't be troubling you again anytime soon," the sheriff assured them. "My deputies tracked them to the territorial border. With 3 wounded men, they won't get far. I've sent telegrams to every lawman within 100 miles. By midday, most of the posse had departed, leaving only Sheriff Tate and Blackwood. My offer still stands, Galloway," Blackwood said as he prepared to leave. "The Double-B could use a man like you." Owen glanced toward Mabel, who was watching them from the porch, a sleeping baby in her arms. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Blackwood, but I have other commitments now." The rancher followed his gaze and smiled knowingly. "I see. Well, the offer remains open, should circumstances change." After they had gone, Owen joined Mabel on the porch. The day had turned beautiful, with clear blue skies and no sign of the previous night's storm except for the muddy ground and scattered branches. "Quite a night," Owen remarked, leaning against the railing. "Quite a night," Mabel agreed. "One I hope never to repeat. Hardin won't be back. Not with the law looking for him in 3 territories." Mabel shifted little Mary to her other arm. "It's not just Hardin I'm worried about. This land is valuable. Others might come." "Yes, they might," Owen acknowledged. "Which is why I turned down Blackwood's offer." Mabel looked up at him sharply. "You did what?" "Owen, that was a good position. Security, decent pay. I have something more important to do right now." He moved closer, his eyes never leaving her face. "If you'll have me, that is." "Have you?" Mabel repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not proposing marriage, not yet," Owen clarified. "We both know it's too soon for that. But I'm offering to stay, to help you run this place and protect the children. To see if what I'm feeling might grow into something more, with time." Mabel was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching his. "And what are you feeling, Owen Galloway?" "That for the first time in years, I found something worth fighting for. Worth staying for." He reached out hesitantly, touching her cheek where the cut was already healing. "I've wandered long enough, Mabel. If you'll have me, I'd like to stop wandering." In response, Mabel shifted the baby slightly and reached for his hand with her free one. "We could use a good man around the place," she said softly. "And the children seem to have taken a liking to you." "Just the children?" Owen asked, a smile tugging at his lips. Mabel's answering smile was like the sun emerging from behind clouds. "Perhaps not just the children." Inside the cabin, Mrs. Jenkins watched through the window, a satisfied expression on her face. Little Michael gurgled happily in her arms, seemingly content with the arrangement. The next weeks passed in a flurry of activity. With the threat of the Hardin Gang removed, Owen and Mabel focused on repairing the cabin and preparing the homestead for the growing season. Mrs. Jenkins stayed on for another week, continuing to teach Mabel everything she knew about caring for infants, before returning to town with a promise to visit regularly. Owen moved his few belongings into the small room that had been Thomas's workshop, maintaining a proper distance while their relationship developed. Together, they established a routine that accommodated both the needs of the babies and the demands of the homestead. Word of their stand against the Hardin Gang spread throughout the county, bringing unexpected benefits. Neighbors who had previously been distant made a point of stopping by to offer help or simply to meet the pair who had faced down the notorious outlaws. Several of the local men organized a work day to help rebuild the damaged barn, and the women brought food and additional supplies for the twins. As spring blossomed into summer, the homestead flourished under their joint care. The garden yielded its first vegetables, and the repaired fences kept the small herd of cattle secure. The twins grew stronger daily, developing distinct personalities: Mary quiet and observant, Michael boisterous and demanding. On a warm evening in July, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Owen took Mabel's hand. "I've been thinking," he began. "A dangerous pastime," she teased. "Indeed." He smiled, then grew serious. "I've been here 3 months now. The homestead is secure, the crops are growing, and the children are thriving." Mabel's smile faded slightly. "Are you saying it's time for you to move on?" "Just the opposite." Owen turned to face her fully. "I'm saying it's time for me to make this arrangement permanent, if you're willing." "Owen Galloway," Mabel said, her eyes wide. "Are you proposing to me?" "I believe I am." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple ring, a gold band with a modest diamond that caught the last rays of the setting sun. "I can't offer you wealth or an easy life, but I can promise to love you, to protect you and the children, and to build a life here that would make Sarah and Thomas proud." Tears filled Mabel's eyes. "When did you get that?" "Last time I rode into town for supplies. Had it made special by the jeweler." Owen looked suddenly uncertain. "Is it too soon?" "If you need more time, no," Mabel interrupted, squeezing his hand. "It's not too soon. Not when you know something is right." She took a deep breath. "Yes, Owen, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then leaned forward to kiss her, a gentle, tender kiss that held both promise and passion. From inside the cabin came the sound of a baby's cry, followed quickly by a second. "The chorus begins," Mabel said with a laugh, pulling back slightly. "They won't stop crying," Owen said with a mock sigh of resignation. Mabel's smile was radiant as she stood, still holding his hand. "Then let me hold them while you rest," she replied, repeating the words that had first connected them. "After all, we have a lifetime of this ahead of us." "A lifetime," Owen agreed, rising to follow her inside. "That sounds just about right." They were married in late August, in a simple ceremony performed by the traveling minister who visited Sterling every 6 weeks. The entire community turned out for the event, held in the yard of the homestead that was now truly their home. Sheriff Tate stood as Owen's best man, while Mrs. Jenkins, now a regular visitor and honorary grandmother to the twins, attended Mabel. The babies, dressed in white gowns sewn by the women of the community, watched the proceedings with wide, curious eyes from the arms of willing attendants. "By the power vested in me," the minister proclaimed, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." As Owen kissed his bride, a cheer went up from the assembled guests. It was a moment of pure joy, all the more precious for the struggles that had preceded it. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with food, music, and dancing. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit, creating a magical glow around the homestead. "Mrs. Galloway," Owen whispered as they shared a dance. "How does it sound?" "Wonderful," Mabel replied, her eyes shining. "Though I'm not sure I'll ever get used to it. We have plenty of time for that." Later, as the last guests departed and the twins slept soundly in their cradle, now moved to a separate small bedroom, Owen and Mabel stood together on the porch, gazing at the star-filled sky. "I never imagined this," Mabel confessed. "After James died, I thought that part of my life was over forever. And I never imagined settling down at all," Owen admitted. "Funny how life surprises you. Good surprises, this time." Mabel leaned against him. "Do you ever regret it? Giving up your freedom to tie yourself to a ready-made family?" Owen turned to her, his expression serious. "Mabel, I was never free. I was just lost. You and the children gave me a direction, a purpose." He kissed her gently. "There's no regret in that." As autumn approached, bringing with it the harvest and preparations for winter, news came that the Hardin Gang had been captured in Wyoming territory. Hardin himself would stand trial for multiple murders, virtually guaranteeing he would never again threaten their peace. The twins celebrated their first birthday with another community gathering, smaller but no less joyful than the wedding had been. They were walking now, tottering determinately around the cabin and getting into everything within reach. "They have your spirit," Owen observed as Michael pulled himself up using a chair, an expression of fierce concentration on his small face. "And your stubbornness," Mabel countered, watching as Mary, who had fallen, immediately got back up and tried again. As winter settled over the valley, the Galloway homestead stood warm and secure against the cold. The harvest had been good, the cellar was full, and the cattle were healthy. Inside the snug cabin, the family gathered around the fireplace each evening, Owen often whittling toys for the children, Mabel sewing or reading from one of her precious books. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell gently outside, Mabel placed a small package in Owen's hands. "Open it," she urged, her eyes twinkling with secret delight. Owen unwrapped the package to find a tiny pair of knitted booties. He looked up at her questioningly. "We'll need them by next summer," Mabel explained, her hand moving unconsciously to her stomach. "The twins will have a little brother or sister to look after." Joy spread across Owen's face as he gathered her into his arms. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby. Our family is growing," Mabel said, leaning into his embrace. "Just like our home." As if on cue, one of the twins, Mary this time, began to cry from the bedroom, quickly joined by her brother. Owen laughed, pressing a kiss to Mabel's forehead. "They won't stop crying," he said, the words now a familiar refrain between them. Mabel's eyes danced with happiness as she responded, "Then let me hold them while you rest." But Owen shook his head, still smiling. "No, my love. Let's hold them together. After all, that's what family does." Hand in hand, they went to tend to their children, secure in the knowledge that the life they were building, unexpected, challenging, and infinitely precious, was exactly where both of them were meant to be.